The crash of porcelain broke through the air like thunder. Zanaya's voice sliced the silence that followed. "How did you dare sit at this table without my permission?" Her words echoed through the apartment walls, sharp and cruel. I sat frozen as my dinner plate flew from her hand, shattering against the floor. The black-eyed pea soup spread across the tiles, splashing over my shoes and soaking the hem of my gray dress. Kareem, my only son, laughed. He even clapped. "Bravo, babe. The old woman has to know her place." Those words burned more than the soup that clung to my skin. Something inside me cracked that night. It wasn't loud or visible, but it was final. The kind of break that happens after years of quiet strain. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that I had a secret. A small, patient secret I had carried in silence. And tonight was the moment it would begin to surface. But before I tell you what I did, let me take you back. Let me show you how an ordinary life can slowly turn into a cage. My name is Amara Dubois, and I'm 67 years old. If you saw me walking down a busy street, you'd probably look right through me. My hair has turned silver, and I tie it into a neat bun every morning. I wear plain dresses, sensible shoes, and I've never cared for jewelry. For 43 years, I was the wife of Theonius Dubois, a steady, unremarkable man who liked his coffee strong and his shirts ironed. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't kind either. He was simply there. The type of husband who came home from work, turned on the television, and expected dinner on the table. I never complained. In my generation, you didn't question those things. You simply did what needed to be done. Our home sat quietly on the outskirts of the city, a small house with peeling paint but a little yard I loved. I grew tomatoes and herbs, tended to them every evening when the light turned golden. Those hours were mine, tiny fragments of peace. I would sit with a cup of chamomile tea in my mother's chipped mug, the air rich with the scent of earth and leaves, and feel almost content. That was before Kareem grew up and before Zanaya entered our lives. Kareem married her 3 years ago. She was beautiful in the way expensive perfume is, sharp, cold, and impossible to ignore. From the first time we met, I felt her dislike. At the wedding, she barely smiled at me. Her eyes had that silent judgment, the kind that says you don't belong here. But I said nothing. I told myself that time would soften her. It didn't. After the wedding, their visits became rare. Kareem always had excuses. "Work is busy, Mom. Zena isn't feeling well. We'll come next week." But next week never came. I would cook his favorite dishes, keep the lights on late, and end up eating alone. When Theonius died suddenly of a heart attack, Kareem came for 2 hours. Zena waited in the car, claiming a migraine. Then they were gone again. The house felt enormous after that. Every sound echoed. I would catch myself waiting for footsteps that never came, for a voice that no longer existed. Grief does strange things. It makes silence heavy, almost alive. Days passed in a blur until one night I sat with a cold cup of tea and faced the truth. I was alone. Utterly alone. No husband, no family nearby, and a son who had already drifted too far away. That realization hit me harder than I could bear. I cried that night for everything I had lost. The man I'd shared my life with, the son I'd raised, and the woman I had once been. And when the tears stopped, I made a decision that would change everything. I told myself that maybe if I gave Kareem something meaningful, he would remember that I mattered. The only thing I owned was my house, the place I had built my life in. It was worth about $80,000. I called Kareem and told him my plan. "I'll sell the house," I said, my voice trembling. "With that money, we can buy a bigger condo and live together. You'll have your space and I'll have mine. We'll be a family again." There was silence on the other end, then a spark of excitement I hadn't heard in years. "You'd really do that, Mom?" "Of course," I whispered. "I'd do anything for you, and I meant it." I truly believed love could be rebuilt with sacrifice. Selling the house was like tearing pages out of my own story. Every corner held memories. The kitchen where I learned to cook, the garden where I prayed for rain, the room where Kareem had taken his first steps. Packing everything into boxes felt like burying a part of myself. When the sale went through, I held the check in my trembling hands, $84,000. My lifetime reduced to numbers on paper. Kareem came the same afternoon with Zena in tow. It was the first time she had ever stepped inside my home. She wrinkled her nose as if the air itself offended her. "What an antique place," she said, brushing her fingers against the curtains I'd sewn myself. "It smells old," I swallowed my pride. I smiled politely. Kareem hugged me and said, "You're the best, Mom." But his eyes weren't on me. They were on the check. We spent the next week searching for apartments. Zena had opinions on everything. This one was too small. That one didn't have enough light. Kareem just nodded along. I said nothing. I always said nothing. Finally, Zena found a condo in a new building downtown. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, modern kitchen, and large windows that looked over the skyline. It cost $85,000. Practically everything I had. "It's perfect," she said, smiling at her reflection in the glass. Kareem turned to me. "What do you think, Mom?" I looked around. The place was bright, sterile, soulless. But if it made them happy, that was enough. "If you like it, then I like it," I said. And that was the moment I sealed my fate. The next week, we went to sign the papers. The lawyer, a weary man named Isaiah, read every document carefully. Halfway through, he frowned. "Mrs. Dubois, just to confirm, this property will be registered under your daughter-in-law's name?" Zena smiled tightly. "Mine and my husband's, of course," I hesitated. "But I'm paying for it." Kareem squeezed my hand. "It's just a formality, Mom. We're family." "It doesn't matter whose name is on it." Isaiah's voice turned firm. "It does matter. Once this is signed, you'll have no legal claim to the property." Zena crossed her arms. "Are you accusing us of something?" The lawyer sighed. "I'm just doing my duty, ma'am." I felt caught between them. My heart was pounding. I didn't want to lose Kareem again. "It's fine," I whispered. "I trust them." Isaiah gave me a long look. Then he slid another paper forward. "At least sign this acknowledgement. It states you understand what you're giving up." My hand shook as I signed. My name looked foreign, thin, and small on the page. When it was done, Zena smiled. Kareem kissed my forehead. "You'll see, Mom," he said. "We're going to be happy here." But Isaiah stopped me at the door. "Mrs. Dubois," he said quietly, slipping me his card. "If you ever need help, call me. You've just given away everything you own." I tucked the card into my purse and thanked him politely. But as I stepped outside with my son and his wife, I already felt a chill in my chest, a whisper of something I couldn't yet name. It was the feeling of walking into a storm without an umbrella. The day we moved into the condo should have been a new beginning, but it felt like a quiet funeral. I watched the movers carry in their glossy furniture, dark leather couches, a massive dining table that looked more suited for a showroom than a home, and paintings filled with swirls I couldn't understand. Everything smelled new and expensive, but also lifeless. My things fit in 2 small boxes: a few clothes, my books, and my mother's old mug. Kareem carried them down the hall and opened the door to a narrow room. "You can take this one, Mom. It's temporary until we settle in." The room had no windows, only a narrow vent that hummed softly. The air smelled stale. Still, I smiled. "It's fine, son. Thank you." I unpacked in silence, arranging my belongings carefully, pretending that the space was mine. I set Theonius's photograph on the bedside table and whispered, "We've made it to the city, old man." But even as I said it, my voice wavered. That night, I lay awake listening to the muffled laughter from the living room. Zanaya's laugh was sharp, Kareem's lighter. The sound of their joy made me ache in a way I couldn't explain. In the following days, I tried to be helpful. I woke up early, prepared coffee the way I always had, with cinnamon and a pinch of brown sugar. But when Zanaya entered the kitchen, she frowned. "I told you I handle breakfast." "Don't touch my counters," I froze. "I just thought..." She poured the pot down the sink. "Your coffee tastes like dirt." I don't know how you can drink it. My throat tightened. 43 years of making coffee, and no one had ever complained. I quietly stepped aside. From that day on, I stopped entering the kitchen before noon. Zanaya made rules. Tiny, suffocating rules. I couldn't use the main bathroom. I couldn't open the balcony door because the dust will ruin the furniture. I couldn't watch television in the living room because it distracted her from work. Each rule chipped away at my existence. I tried to find small escapes. I went for walks early in the morning, bought fresh bread, sometimes a little fruit. But when I returned, she would inspect the bags like a customs officer. Why did you buy this? We already have bread. You're wasting money again. I wanted to tell her that it was my money, the last bit I had kept aside after paying for this condo. But I swallowed the words. You're right, I said. I'll stop. Her lips curved into a cold smile. Good. I'll handle the shopping from now on. And just like that, another piece of my independence vanished. Even meals became a quiet humiliation. At first, Zanaya would leave a plate for me on the kitchen counter. I ate alone while they dined at the table. One evening, I gathered my courage. I had cooked smothered chicken, Kareem's childhood favorite. I placed it on the dining table, hopeful. When they walked in, I smiled nervously. I thought we could eat together tonight. Zanaya's laughter sliced through the air. Together? Since when do you sit with us? Kareem looked away, pretending to adjust a napkin. My chest ached. It's your favorite, Kareem. I thought, Zanaya interrupted. Your place is in the kitchen. I stood up slowly, gathered my plate, and went back into the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Kareem's voice. Thanks, babe. Smells amazing. He didn't even realize I'd made the meal. That night, I sat in my windowless room, the sound of their laughter echoing faintly. I thought of my garden, of the orange light that once bathed my tomatoes. I had traded sunlight for shadows. A month passed. I barely existed in that apartment. I was careful not to make noise. I timed my footsteps, avoided the living room, and spoke only when necessary. Still, nothing I did was right. You walked too loudly. You left hair in the sink. You're always in the way. The insults came like clockwork, steady and sharp. I tried to talk to Kareem one afternoon when I found him alone. Son, I don't think your wife likes having me here. She says terrible things. He didn't even look up from his phone. Mom, don't start. She's under stress. She treats me like I'm an intruder in my own house, he sighed. Maybe if you helped more, she wouldn't get so upset. You're not exactly easy to live with, my heart stuttered. Son, I paid for this condo. He stood up, eyes cold. And we gave you a roof. Be grateful, Mom. Some people don't even have that. When he walked away, the silence left behind was heavier than his words. That night, I took Isaiah's business card from my purse. I turned it over in my hands, tracing the embossed letters. Attorney at law, he had warned me. He had tried to protect me, but I hadn't listened. I thought of calling him, but I didn't know what to say. The papers were signed, the condo was legally theirs. What could a lawyer do now? I slid the card back into the drawer and whispered, It's too late. One weekend, Zanaya hosted a party. Her friends filled the apartment, laughter spilling down the hallway. I stayed in my room, but the music was too loud to ignore. At one point, a guest knocked on my door. Is there a bathroom this way? Before I could answer, I heard Zanaya's voice through the laughter. Don't go in there. That's just where we keep old things we don't use. Laughter followed. I sat on my bed, trembling. Old things we don't use. That was me. I was no longer a mother or a woman. I was a discarded relic taking up space in their perfect life. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the soft hum of the pipes above me like a cruel lullaby. Somewhere deep inside, something began to stir, a faint pulse of anger that had slept for too long. Morning light never reached my room. It was a small box of shadows that smelled faintly of damp air and detergent. I had learned to live in silence, timing my movements to avoid crossing paths with Zanaya. But even the quiet had begun to feel dangerous, like calm water hiding a current. I woke early that day, feeling restless. My laundry had piled up for weeks. Every time I asked to use the washing machine, Zanaya had some reason to say no, so I waited until she left for work. The condo was finally quiet. I carried my basket down to the laundry room, humming softly just to hear my own voice. The washing machine had barely finished half its cycle when I heard the apartment door slam. Footsteps. Sharp. Fast. Furious. Zanaya was home early. She appeared at the laundry room doorway with her arms folded and eyes blazing. "What do you think you're doing?" I froze. "I'm washing my clothes." Without a word, she stepped forward, opened the machine mid-cycle, and pulled my dripping clothes out. One by one, she threw them onto the floor. "I had already planned to wash today," she said coldly. "Now you'll wait your turn." My voice trembled. "But they're halfway done." "I don't care," she snapped. "This is my condo, my washer, and my rules. Don't touch what isn't yours." I stared at the soapy puddle spreading at my feet. My clothes, my few remaining possessions, were drenched and dirty again. I gathered them in silence, my hands shaking. As I walked away, leaving a trail of water behind me, I heard her call after me. "Next time, ask before touching anything." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I climbed the stairs slowly, every step heavier than the last. In my room, I hung the wet clothes on makeshift lines across the furniture. They dripped onto the floor, leaving pale marks on the tiles. That night, the damp smell filled the room, and I lay awake, wondering how a home could feel colder than a grave. Weekends were the worst. Zanaya loved to host her friends. Laughter echoed through the walls, the smell of food filled the air, and I was expected to stay invisible. One Saturday, the noise was unbearable. I sat with my hands pressed against my ears. When I finally gathered the courage to step out for water, one of her friends looked at me with mild curiosity. "Oh, I didn't know you had help living with you," she said. Before I could respond, Zanaya's voice cut through the air. "That's not help. That's just my husband's mother. She lives here." Then came the laughter. I turned and walked back to my room. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not anymore. The days blurred together. I began to eat once a day whenever food was left in the kitchen. Sometimes there was only stale bread or fruit too soft to keep. My body grew thin, my back ached, and my reflection looked older than I remembered. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were hollow, her lips pressed tight as if holding back years of swallowed words. I had become a shadow in my own home. Then one afternoon, it all changed. Zanaya stormed into my room without knocking. Her perfume hit me first, strong and sharp. Her eyes scanned the space with disdain. "This room is a mess. It smells damp. What do you even do all day?" I looked around. The bed was made. The books were neatly stacked. "It's clean," I said quietly. She ignored me, grabbed one of my books from the shelf, flipped through it, and tossed it onto the floor. "You still read this junk? No wonder your mind is stuck in the past." She threw another, then another. The sound of pages hitting the tiles filled the room. "Please," I whispered, "stop." But she didn't. When she reached for the small photograph of Theonius on my table, my heart stopped. She lifted it with a smirk. "Your husband," she said mockingly. "I wonder if he knew what a burden you were. Maybe that's why he died, just to get away." Her words pierced straight through me. Something deep inside me roared, but I swallowed it. I had swallowed everything else. She placed the photo back carelessly, crooked and unsteady. "I need this room," she said suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "I'm turning it into a study. You'll have to find somewhere else to sleep. Maybe the living room or the kitchen." My voice cracked. "This is my room. Where am I supposed to go?" Her expression didn't change. Not my problem. She left, closing the door behind her. The sound of it echoed like a verdict. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed for hours. My body trembled, not from fear this time, but from something stronger. A quiet fury. I looked at the card Isaiah had given me. It was still in my drawer, untouched, waiting. My fingers traced the printed name. Isaiah Sanchez, attorney at law. I had wanted to believe in my son, in his love, in the promise of family. But belief had turned to chains. Maybe silence wasn't strength anymore. Maybe it was just surrender. I held the card tighter. I didn't know what Isaiah could do for me, or if it was already too late. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I couldn't keep living like this. The woman staring back at me from the mirror wasn't weak anymore. She was cornered. And cornered people find ways to fight. The night had felt endless. Every sound in the condo echoed louder than usual. The ticking of the old clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the low whistle of wind seeping through the vents. I barely slept. My mind kept replaying Zanaya's voice telling me to leave my room, her words twisting around in my chest like thorns. When the first light crept through the narrow vent, I sat up, clutching Isaiah's business card. I had read his name 100 times already, tracing each letter as if it might give me courage. For months I had endured, convincing myself that things would change if I stayed quiet. But silence had become my enemy. It protected everyone but me. I picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed his number. It rang 3 times before a calm, steady voice answered. Isaiah Sanchez, attorney at law. Mr. Sanchez, I said, my voice breaking. It's Amara Dubois. You might not remember me, but, he interrupted gently. Of course, Mrs. Dubois. I remember you very well. How are you holding up? That single question cracked me open. The words spilled out faster than I could stop them. I told him everything. The insults, the hunger, the loneliness, the humiliation. I spoke for half an hour without pausing for breath, afraid that if I stopped, I would lose the courage to continue. He listened quietly. Not once did he interrupt. When I finally stopped, the silence on the other end felt heavy. Mrs. Dubois, he said at last, I'm truly sorry for what you've been through. But I need to tell you something important, something I should have told you months ago. My heart raced. What is it? He took a slow breath. When we signed the condo documents, I noticed irregularities in the way the transfer was done. Your son and daughter-in-law signed as recipients of a donation, but the ownership record wasn't properly completed. Technically, the condo title could still be corrected. And before you left that day, I made an extra copy of the original file. It lists you as the owner. I shouldn't have done it, but my conscience wouldn't let me ignore what was happening. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind tried to grasp his words. Are you saying this condo could still be in my name? He hesitated, then said firmly, yes. If you come to my office and sign the correction documents, we can register the property under you, legally and permanently. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't the same kind of tears I'd cried before. This time, they came from something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That afternoon, I left the condo while Zanaya was at work and Kareem was out. I walked slowly, each step cautious but determined. The air outside felt different, cooler, freer. I hadn't left alone in weeks, and now I was walking toward something that could save me. Isaiah's office was on the 3rd floor of a quiet building downtown. When I entered, he greeted me with a kind smile and a cup of tea. You made it, he said warmly. Yes, I whispered. I had to. He handed me a folder. These are the documents. Once you sign, I'll file them with the registry. It may take about a week, but once processed, the condo will legally belong to you. I opened the folder. There it was. My name in bold print, owner, Amara Dubois. It looked surreal, almost like it belonged to another woman. What if I regret it later? I asked softly. Isaiah met my eyes. Then we won't file it. But let me ask, are you happy in that condo right now? My throat tightened. No, I feel like I'm disappearing. Then you already have your answer. I signed every page, my hand steady this time. When it was done, Isaiah placed the papers into a sealed envelope. I'll take care of the rest. Don't tell them anything yet? When it's finalized, I'll call you. How much do I owe you? I asked. He smiled faintly. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Dubois. Let's call this my good deed for the year. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months. The streets looked brighter. Even the city noise sounded like music. I returned to the condo quietly, slipping back into my room before anyone came home. That night, I lay in bed with my secret. My secret power. I smiled for the first time in so long that it felt strange on my face. Days passed and nothing changed outwardly. I still ate alone. I still endured Zanaya's sharp tongue and Kareem's cold indifference. But inside me, something had shifted. Every cruel remark now bounced off the armor of my secret. Zanaya noticed. One morning, she found me humming in the kitchen. Why are you smiling? She asked suspiciously. I shrugged. Maybe I'm just in a good mood. Her brow furrowed. Well, you shouldn't be. You have nothing to be happy about. I met her gaze for the first time in months. We'll see about that. She froze for a second, confused by my calm tone, then turned away, muttering under her breath. She didn't know that the walls she had built around me were about to crumble. A week later, the phone rang. It was Isaiah. His voice carried a hint of triumph. Mrs. Dubois, he said, it's done. The registry accepted the correction. The condo is now legally yours. Congratulations. I closed my eyes. Thank you, I whispered, feeling the words like a prayer. When I hung up, I sat still for a long moment, absorbing it. I had my life back, my home, my dignity, but I didn't rush to confront them. Not yet. I waited, observed, planned. Zanaya's cruelty was growing. Kareem's cowardice was deepening. They both thought I was powerless, and that was exactly how I wanted it, because when the moment came, I wanted them to see it in my eyes, the truth they'd ignored, the strength they'd buried, and when they did, it would already be too late. 7 days had passed since Isaiah's call, yet I still hadn't told anyone. I carried that secret like a hidden flame, quiet but alive. Every time Zanaya hurled an insult or Kareem ignored me, I would silently whisper to myself, wait. The waiting gave me power. For the first time in months, I was not afraid. I moved through the condo with a calm that unsettled Zanaya. She could sense something was different, but didn't know what. One evening, she cornered me in the hallway. You've been acting strange lately. What are you smiling about? I looked her straight in the eyes. Maybe I've just remembered who I am, her brow furrowed. Don't get smart with me, old woman, I smiled faintly. Too late for that. She turned away, muttering something about senile arrogance, but I didn't care. The silence that used to trap me was now my weapon. I could see her confusion growing. She thrived on my fear, and now it was gone. A few days later, she gathered her courage again. She waited until Kareem came home from work and called me into the living room. We've decided something, she said, her tone cold and deliberate. I looked at her and then at my son, who couldn't meet my eyes. What decision? Zanaya crossed her arms. You can't stay here anymore. We've found a senior facility that will take you in 2 weeks. It's decent, nothing fancy. You'll pay for it with your pension. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice calm. And where will I live after that? That's your problem, she said flatly. You'll figure it out. Kareem finally spoke, his tone low. Mom, it's for the best. You need help and space. You'll be around people your age. My lips trembled, but I forced a smile. I see. So that's what family means now, space. He sighed, avoiding my gaze. Don't make this harder than it already is. I nodded slowly. You're right, Kareem. I won't make it harder. They didn't know it. But that was the first time in months I spoke without trembling. That night, I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding Isaiah's card in my hand. The moonlight spilling through the vent painted silver streaks across the floor. It was time. Tomorrow, I would stop being the quiet woman in the corner. Tomorrow, they would know who truly owned this place. I slept deeply that night, without dreams. When dawn came, I felt an unfamiliar calm. Not peace exactly, something stronger, resolve. The day came faster than I expected. Zanaya had organized a dinner party, inviting her coworkers and a few friends. She wanted to show off her beautiful condo and her perfect life. I was supposed to stay in my room, as always, invisible while the laughter filled the hall, but not tonight. I dressed carefully. A dark green dress pressed and simple. My hair neatly pinned back. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized. Strong, composed, unafraid. The smell of food drifted down the hall, along with music and laughter. I waited until I heard the clinking of glasses before stepping out of my room. I walked down the hall slowly, deliberately. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. When I appeared in the dining room doorway, no one noticed me at first. Then Zanaya turned her head and froze. "What are you doing here?" She hissed. I took another step forward. "I live here," I said softly. "This is my dinner, my guests. Go back to your room." I shook my head. Not this time. The room fell silent. Her friends exchanged awkward glances. Kareem put down his glass and forced a smile. "Mom, please don't make a scene." "We'll talk later." "A scene?" I repeated. "You mean like the ones you've both made me live through for months?" The silence thickened. Zanaya's face turned red. "Get out," she said through gritted teeth. I stayed where I was. "No." Her hand trembled as she grabbed a plate from the table and threw it to the floor. It shattered into pieces, soup splashing across the tiles. Kareem clapped mockingly. "Bravo, babe. The old woman still doesn't know her place." Their laughter was the final spark I needed. I straightened my back and spoke clearly, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Get out of my condo." Everyone froze. Zanaya blinked. "What did you just say?" I repeated, "Get out of my condo." Kareem laughed nervously. "Mom, don't start with this again. The condo isn't yours." Without another word, I reached into my purse and took out a folder. The room went dead silent as I unfolded the documents and laid them neatly on the table. "Are you sure about that?" I asked. Zanaya picked up the papers. Her confident smirk faltered. Her lips moved as she read the title, Property Ownership, Amara Dubois. Her face drained of color. "This can't be real." "Oh, it's very real," I said quietly. "It's been legally registered for over a week. The money that paid for this place was mine, and now the condo is too." The room erupted into whispers. Her guests began standing, mumbling excuses to leave. Kareem snatched the documents from her trembling hands and scanned them. You tricked us," he said, his voice shaking. "No," I corrected. "You tricked me. I simply corrected your mistake." Zanaya's hands clenched into fists. "You think you can kick us out?" "Yes," I said calmly. "And you will leave tonight." Her friends hurried out of the room, leaving only the three of us standing in the tense silence. Zanaya's voice cracked into a scream. "You'll regret this, you bitter old witch." I didn't flinch. "Maybe I will. But at least I'll regret it in my own home." Kareem's shoulders slumped. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, they both looked small, powerless. The way they had made me feel for months, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. For a moment after my words, the apartment stood still. So still I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. The air was thick with disbelief. Zanaya's face had turned ghostly pale, her jaw tightening with rage she could barely contain. Kareem stared at the documents as if the ink itself had betrayed him. "You can't do this," he muttered. "We're your family." "Family?" I repeated, the word trembling on my tongue. "You called me family when you made me eat scraps alone in the kitchen? When you told your friends I was something you didn't use anymore?" Zanaya slammed her hands on the table. "Enough! This is a trick and we'll fix it." You don't know what you've done. I looked straight at her. On the contrary, I finally do. Kareem stood up, his voice rising. You're going to regret this, Mom. I swear. I already regret trusting you, I interrupted softly. There's nothing more you can take from me now. That quiet confidence enraged them more than shouting ever could. Zanaya's breathing grew shallow. Her voice trembled but dripped with venom. You think you've won because you have some papers? You're old, weak. How long do you think you'll last here alone? When you die, it'll all come back to Kareem. He's your only heir? The realization hit like cold steel. Her words were not just cruel. They were calculated. That's exactly why I've already changed my will. I lied without hesitation. If anything happens to me, this condo goes to charity. Kareem will get nothing. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The room vibrated with tension. For a second, no one moved. Then it happened. Fast, violent, irreversible. Zanaya lunged forward, shoving me with both hands. The world tilted. The edge of the table caught my hip. I fell hard onto the cold floor. Pain exploded through my body, white-hot and blinding. Zena! Kareem shouted. What did you do? She stumbled back, her face a mask of shock. I didn't mean to. She provoked me. I tried to move, but the pain in my hip was unbearable. I couldn't stand. My breath came in gasps. Don't touch me, I said when Kareem knelt beside me. Don't you dare touch me! I reached for my phone with trembling fingers. My voice was thin but steady as I pressed 911. Emergency services. What's your situation? I've been assaulted in my home, I said through clenched teeth. I need an ambulance. I think my hip is broken, Zanaya screamed. She's lying! And tried to snatch the phone away, but Kareem blocked her. Stop, Zena, he shouted. Enough. For the first time in months, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't cold indifference, fear, guilt, and something that looked like regret. Zena paced back and forth, muttering, This is your fault, Amara. You've ruined everything. Everything! I leaned against the wall, clutching my side, every breath stabbing like glass. Sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. When the knock came at the door, Kareem opened it. 2 police officers entered, followed by paramedics carrying medical bags. One of them knelt beside me. Ma'am, are you the one who called? Yes, I whispered. She pushed me. I fell, the male officer turned to Zanaya. Is that true? Her voice was frantic. No, she fell by herself. She's old and clumsy. Ask him! She pointed at Kareem. The officer looked at him. Sir, what did you see? Kareem hesitated. His hands trembled. Then finally he said the words I never expected to hear. She pushed her. I saw it. Zena's face twisted in disbelief. What are you saying? You're lying. He shook his head. No, I've lied enough. I'm done. The female officer approached Zena calmly. Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault. Zena's scream ripped through the room. You can't do this. He's lying. You're all lying. The officers handcuffed her as she struggled, shouting curses that filled the hall. This isn't over, old witch. You'll regret this. The paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher. The pain was unbearable, but I refused to close my eyes. I wanted to see it, every second of her defeat. As they carried me out, I saw Kareem standing frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. The police led Zanaya past him, still thrashing, her once perfect composure shattered. The elevator doors closed, muffling her voice. For the first time, silence returned to the condo. But it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of justice. At the hospital, the world blurred into a fog of white light and painkillers. The doctors moved around me, speaking in calm, measured tones. Severe hip fracture. We'll need to operate, I nodded weakly. Do what you must. Before the anesthesia took me under, I saw the paramedic from earlier adjusting my blanket. His voice was gentle. You're safe now, ma'am. Rest. It's over. But as I drifted into darkness, I thought, no, it's not over yet. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something new. a reckoning that would stretch far beyond this night. When I opened my eyes, the room was awash in sterile light. The steady beeping of a monitor filled the silence. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then the pain in my hip reminded me. The surgery, the fall, the sirens. I turned my head slowly and saw someone sitting near the window. His shoulders were slumped, his hands clasped tightly together. It took me a second to realize it was Kareem. He looked older, smaller somehow, as though the guilt had carved lines into his face overnight. When he noticed I was awake, he stood quickly. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You're awake?" I didn't answer right away. The words caught in my throat. "I'm sorry," he said, tears pooling in his eyes. "I am so sorry." I studied his face in silence. This was the same son who had watched me suffer, who had laughed as his wife humiliated me. The same son who had clapped as my dinner plate shattered at my feet. And yet in that moment I didn't see cruelty. I saw a boy drowning in shame. I spoke softly, my voice hoarse. "Where is she?" His gaze dropped to the floor. "Zena's in custody. They charged her with battery. The judge issued a restraining order. She's not allowed near you or the building." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow, heavy breath. "Justice," I murmured, though it didn't feel like victory, more like relief mixed with exhaustion. "I'm divorcing her," Kareem said quietly. "I should have done it long ago. I should have protected you. But I didn't. I was a coward." The word hung in the air. I didn't argue. I didn't have to. He already knew the truth. He reached for my hand, hesitant. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom. I just needed to see you, to make sure you're okay." I looked at his hand hovering there, uncertain. Then slowly I let him take mine. "Are you okay?" I asked, surprising both of us. He shook his head, a sad laugh escaping. "No, but I deserve that." The nurse came in a moment later to check my vitals, breaking the tension. Kareem stepped back, wiping his face. "The doctor said the surgery went well," he said. "You'll walk again after therapy, but it'll take time." I nodded. "Time I'll use wisely." He stood in the doorway, uncertain. "I'll let you rest. I'll come back tomorrow." Before he could leave, I said his name. "Kareem." He turned. "You told the truth," I said. "After everything, that means something." Tears welled in his eyes again. "It's not enough." "No," I said quietly. "But it's a start." He nodded, then left, closing the door behind him. The next few days passed in slow motion. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped. Painkillers dulled my body, but not my thoughts. I thought about Theonius and the quiet life we had shared. About the house I'd sold, the garden I'd loved, the mug that once felt warm between my palms. I thought about all the years I had spent believing that silence was strength. Now I knew better. Silence had been survival, but using my voice had saved me. On the third day, a hospital social worker came to see me. She was kind, young, and spoke with a gentle authority. "Mrs. Dubois," she said, "you'll need help during your recovery. Do you have family who can care for you at home?" I hesitated. The easy answer would have been yes. Kareem was my son. But something inside me resisted. "No," I said. "I have savings. I'll hire help," she smiled. "We can help arrange that. You'll have a nurse and physical therapist visit your condo regularly." For the first time, the word condo didn't sting. It was mine now, truly mine. That night, as I lay in bed, I looked out the hospital window. The city lights shimmered in the distance. I thought about the pain I had endured and the strength I had found buried beneath it. I wasn't whole yet, but I was healing, and for once healing on my own terms. 3 days later, Kareem returned. He looked more composed this time. He brought flowers and a small box of pastries from a bakery I used to love. He sat beside me quietly for a while before speaking. "I've made some arrangements at the condo," he said. "Grab bars in the bathroom, a better chair, and space for your physical therapy. Everything's ready for when you come home." "With what money?" I asked cautiously. He looked down. I sold my car and a few things. I don't deserve comfort right now. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I nodded slowly. Thank you, Kareem. He exhaled, as though he had been holding his breath for hours. When you're discharged, he said softly, I'll be there to help you settle in. After that, I'll keep my distance unless you want me around. I watched him, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. This time I saw no deceit, only a man trying to fix what he had broken. You'll come by, I said. We'll take it one day at a time. His lips trembled into a small, grateful smile. I'd like that. The morning of my discharge arrived sooner than I expected. As the nurses helped me into a wheelchair, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked fragile but alive. My eyes were clearer than they had been in months. Kareem waited by the entrance holding a bag of my belongings. He walked beside the hospital staff as they wheeled me to a van for people recovering from surgery. The city passed by the windows in slow motion. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to go home. When we reached the building, Kareem helped me out carefully. Take your time, he said softly. No rush, I nodded, each step cautious but steady. As I crossed the threshold, I felt something shift inside me. This was no longer their condo. It was my home. The first morning back felt unreal. The condo was the same, yet everything about it felt different. The air seemed lighter, the walls no longer closing in. Even the silence had changed. It wasn't heavy or cruel anymore. It was gentle, like a deep breath after years of suffocation. The nurse arrived just after sunrise, helping me settle into a slow routine. My hip ached, but pain had become something I could live with. It reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still standing, at least in spirit. Each day followed a rhythm: medication, therapy, rest, and quiet reflection. The nurse would prepare tea, and I would sip it slowly by the window, watching sunlight spill across the floorboards that had once witnessed my humiliation. Now they carried my steps toward recovery. Kareem visited every afternoon, never empty-handed. Sometimes he brought flowers, sometimes books, and sometimes just quiet company. He didn't speak much at first, as though afraid that words might reopen wounds. But slowly, conversation began to flow again. Tentative, fragile, honest. Do you remember when I used to sit in the garden with Dad? I asked one day. Kareem smiled faintly. You'd make me weed the tomatoes and tell me stories so I wouldn't complain. I chuckled softly. And you still complained? He laughed too, but the sound carried sadness. I was a selfish son, he said finally. I forgot what love really means. I reached for his hand. You forgot for a while. But forgetting isn't the same as losing. He looked at me, eyes glistening. How can you forgive me so easily? Because anger keeps you trapped, I said. And I've lived in too many cages already. He didn't respond, but his silence this time was one of understanding, not avoidance. Weeks turned into a month. The bruises faded, the pain eased, and my strength returned slowly. I began to cook again, simple meals at first. The smell of simmering broth filled the kitchen, and for the first time in so long, it felt like a home again. One evening, Kareem arrived with a box in his hands. I found something you might want, he said. Inside were my old garden tools. Rusty, worn, but still recognizable. I smiled. Where did you find these? In storage, he said. You kept them after selling the house. I ran my fingers over the handle of the small trowel, the same one I'd used to plant my first tomatoes. Maybe I'll start a small garden on the balcony, I said. It's not much space, but enough for life to grow. He nodded. I'll help you set it up, and he did. The next day, we filled pots with soil, planted herbs, and placed them by the railing where they could catch the morning sun. Mint, basil, and rosemary, scents of memory and renewal. Each sprout felt like a promise, a symbol that even broken things could bloom again. But peace, I learned, doesn't erase the past. It reshapes it. Every now and then I would hear echoes of Zanaya's voice in my mind. Sharp words, cruel laughter, the sound of plates breaking. But instead of trembling, I breathed through it. I let the memories come and then fade. They no longer controlled me. Kareem received updates from the court. Zanaya had pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. She was placed on probation and ordered to attend anger management sessions. She had also been barred from contacting either of us. When he told me, I felt no satisfaction, no joy, just peace. She was broken, I said quietly. Maybe now she'll see the cracks in herself. Kareem sighed. I still can't believe I let it get that far. Then don't waste your life believing in guilt, I replied. Spend it building something better. He looked at me for a long moment. You really are stronger than anyone I know, I smiled faintly. Strength isn't what people think. It's not shouting or fighting. Sometimes it's just staying kind when the world gives you every reason not to be. As weeks turned into months, I began to walk again without help. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence. The day I took my first steps without the cane, Kareem stood by the doorway, clapping softly. You did it, he said proudly. No, I said, smiling. We did it. He came closer and hugged me gently, his voice breaking. I don't deserve you, Mom. I patted his shoulder. Then make sure you become the kind of man your mother would be proud of. He nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who used to run through the garden, chasing sunlight. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the balcony beside the small garden we'd made. The wind carried the scent of mint, and sunlight painted the city in gold. I thought of Isaiah and the moment I'd signed those papers. Without his quiet intervention, I might have vanished into silence forever. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. Mrs. Dubois, he answered warmly. It's good to hear your voice. I wanted to thank you, I said. For everything. You don't owe me thanks, he replied. You did the hardest part yourself. You found your voice. Maybe, I said softly. But sometimes it takes someone believing in you to remind you it's still there. There was a brief pause before he said, You sound happier. I am, I admitted. And I intend to stay that way. We said goodbye, and I sat for a while longer, watching the sun dip below the skyline. That evening, I wrote a note and placed it inside my journal. When they tried to silence me, I learned the strength of my own voice. When they tried to take my home, I built one inside myself. And when they tried to break me, I grew roots instead. I closed the journal and smiled. 6 months passed before I heard the sound that would test my peace again. A sharp, unexpected knock on the door. It was early evening, the sky painted with soft lavender light. I had just finished watering the balcony plants, their green leaves swaying in the warm breeze. For a moment, I hesitated. Few people ever visited. My nurse had left hours earlier, and Kareem wasn't due until morning. The knocking came again, louder this time. I opened the door slightly, the chain still latched. My heart skipped when I saw who stood on the other side. Zanaya. Her hair was shorter now, her face thinner. The makeup she used to wear so proudly was gone, and for the first time I saw the person beneath the perfection. The cracks, the exhaustion, the emptiness. Please, she said quietly, her voice hoarse. I just need a minute. I stared at her in silence. Memories flashed behind my eyes. Her laughter, the insults, the pain. Every cruel word she had ever thrown at me replayed like echoes in the walls. What do you want, Zanaya? I asked evenly. She looked down. I'm not here to fight. I had nowhere else to go. The court hearings are over. My parents won't take me back, and Kareem won't speak to me. I've lost everything. You had everything, I said softly. And you destroyed it. I know, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to tell you I'm sorry. Her voice trembled in a way I had never heard before. Not out of anger, but out of pain. I wake up every night hearing the sound of you falling, she said. I can't get it out of my head. I see your face and I remember what I did. I can't erase it. I needed you to know I'm not that person anymore. I stood still, the weight of her words pressing against my chest. The woman in front of me wasn't the same one who had tormented me. Time and consequence had stripped away her pride, leaving only regret. Part of me wanted to slam the door and never look back. But another part, the part that had survived everything, understood something deeper. Hatred was a heavy thing to carry. I opened the door wider but didn't invite her in. "Zanaya," I said quietly, "I don't hate you. I did for a while, but not anymore. You've already punished yourself more than I ever could." She nodded, sobbing quietly. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," I said. "But forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about peace. And I've fought too hard for mine to let anger take it again." She looked up, her eyes red. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what that means." "I do," I said softly. "Now go rebuild what's left of you. But not here. My peace doesn't share space with ghosts." She nodded slowly, wiped her tears, and stepped back. For a moment, our eyes met, two women forever changed by the same pain. Then she turned and walked away. I closed the door gently and leaned against it, my breath unsteady. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was closure. Later that night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea. The herbs we'd planted had grown tall and fragrant. The city lights twinkled below like scattered stars. Kareem arrived unexpectedly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You're up late," he said, setting one beside me. "I had a visitor," I said quietly. He tensed. "Zena?" I nodded. "She's gone now." He looked worried. "What did she want?" "To say sorry, and you believed her?" I smiled faintly. "It doesn't matter if I did. What matters is that I listened and then let her go." He exhaled, relief softening his face. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Mom." "No," I said gently. "Just older. Life has a way of teaching us when to hold on and when to release." We sat in silence for a while, sipping our drinks, watching the night settle. Kareem broke the quiet first. "I've been offered a job in another city," he said. "I'll visit, but I think I need a fresh start." I smiled. "Good. You've spent too long living in the ruins of what was. Go build something new." He looked down, his voice soft. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could," I said. "You just needed to remember who you were." He smiled then, the kind of smile I hadn't seen since he was a child. After he left, I stayed on the balcony, watching the first hint of dawn rise over the skyline. A soft breeze brushed against my face, carrying the scent of mint and basil. I thought about everything that had happened, the years of silence, the cruelty, the fight, the pain, and finally, the peace. Life had tested me in ways I never imagined. It had taken my comfort, my pride, and almost my faith. But it had given me something far greater in return: resilience, self-worth, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving what was meant to break you. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and whispered to the morning light, "I'm home." The city began to stir beneath me, another day unfolding. My story wasn't over. It had simply changed shape. When I lost everything, I learned that peace isn't given, it's claimed. When I forgave those who hurt me, I found freedom in places I never looked before. And when I finally stood on my own, I realized that even in the ruins of what was, we can rebuild something beautiful. Because sometimes life doesn't give us a second chance. It gives us a moment of truth, and that's enough to begin again.